Hey, what's up guys? Today we're gonna do something a little bit different. I'm here at SoCal Swords in Orange County because they're doing a longsword cutting tournament. I've never done a cutting tournament before, especially not longsword. Definitely not my specialty, but I thought it would be fun. So I'm gonna bring you guys along with me and I'm gonna compete. So we'll see how I do. I don't know how these things work. I've never done it before. It's like a bunch of rules, but I'm gonna kind of take you guys with me and kind of show you how it's scored, and yeah, it'll be fun. I'm a little nervous, I'm not gonna lie. How do you think I'm gonna do?
I have no idea.
You're not supposed to say, you're supposed to say you're gonna do so
You're
good.
You're gonna win.
Oh yeah.
So when I first arrived, I was running a little late, so they were already into their first event. Luckily, this was a very relaxed and chill cutting tournament. It wasn't super serious. Everyone seemed to just be having fun and hanging out. Since this was my first cutting tournament, I really didn't know what to expect. I thought it was all going to be tatami mat cutting, but apparently longsword tournaments tend to be about 30% paper cutting, which is something I've never done. For this tournament, everyone is required to use the same sword to make things fair, which makes sense. One for paper cutting and the other one for tatami mats. Both swords were really nice actually. I think they were Valiant Arms blades, but I'm not 100% on that. So the way this tournament works is there are 2 rounds. Each round has 2 challenges or feats. One on paper, one on tatami mat. After both rounds are completed, your scores from each round are added up and the top 4 then move on to the finals. There were 19 total contestants for this tournament, so I was excited to see how I placed. For the first event, each contestant performed 6 basic cuts on hanging paper, both right and left downward diagonal, rising, and horizontal cuts. Each cut is worth up to 20 points and is judged on footwork and how straight and clean the cut is. So I'd never cut paper before, but I figured how hard could it be? It's just freaking paper. Turns out I should have focused more because I missed the edge of the paper on my very first cut. I'm not really used to hitting a target that wide, and in hindsight, I should have just stepped closer. On my second cut, I made it through, but at the very end, I cut slightly into my previous cut, which lost me some points. But my rising cuts were really clean. At this point, I felt much more comfortable cutting paper. Now, the horizontal cuts are the hardest because it's extremely obvious when it's not perfectly straight across. I kind of slanted my first cut a bit and scooped the last one, but overall, not bad. Once all open floor contestants complete the challenge, the advanced cutters do the same feat, but with a slightly more difficult version. For this, they have to do the exact same cuts, but with a blunted fetter, which requires extremely fast cuts and really clean edge alignment. This is RJ, the guy who runs SoCal Swords, and he's the owner for a reason. So for the first event, I got 86 points out of 120, putting me in 14th place out of 19 contestants. Not a great start, but I knew I'd make up for it when it came to cutting tatami mats in the next challenge. So the next event was tatami mat cutting, and I was very excited because this is what I came here for. For this challenge, each competitor will start about 8 feet away from the target. On a nearby monitor, a red arrow will appear at one of the 4 corners of the screen. You are to then immediately walk towards the target and smoothly perform the indicated cut. Each cut is worth up to 20 points with a total of 8 potential cuts. This one is interesting because you're judged on not only how clean your cut is, but also your footwork and how smooth you transition from the starting line and into your cut. It's also a test of accuracy, because if you cut too much of the tatami mat early on, you won't have room to complete all 8 cuts. And as you get lower on the mat, the more difficult the rising cuts become, so you really want to utilize as much of the mat as possible without cutting into previous cuts, which is called mountaining and something they'll deduct points for. This is a great test. It teaches how to judge distance, reaction time, accuracy. I'd never done this before, but it was pretty cool. Sort of gamified tatami mat cutting, which I dig. On my turn, I took a pretty neutral stance since I didn't know which direction I'd have to cut. I execute my first cut as high as possible to make sure I have enough room for all 8 cuts. Now I'm waiting for the monitor to tell me what the next cut is, and I'm looking super serious. This one was super clean. I realized in the previous cut I wasn't using my hips enough, so I made sure to do that on this one, and it shows just how much more deliberate and decisive the cut was in comparison to the first one, where I basically just swung with my arms. This next cut is also pretty nice. You can see I'm twisting my hips early on to drive the blade through. I also cut really close to my last one in order to utilize as much of the mat as possible. My next cut is a right-sided Oberhau, which is the easiest of all cuts, so I just focused on accuracy, trying to cut as close to my last one as possible, which ended up being really clean. The mat barely moved. For the next Unterhau, I tried cutting a little too close to my last one and ended up fraying the target. If I had just cut a tiny bit lower, it would have been clean, but I definitely lost points on this one since I intersected my last cut. You can clearly see the disappointment on my face. So for this next cut, I get a little bit cocky and end up chopping with the very tip of the blade, which has very little power. Not only that, but my edge alignment is way off. I definitely rushed this cut because I was still thinking about the previous when I should be focusing on the task at hand. This next cut, I just brute force it. Because I didn't make it through the previous cut, I'm just swinging for the fence, as you can tell, because my edge alignment is all over the place. And with the mat crooked, it makes for a bit of mess, even scaring the sword handler on the sidelines.
Sorry, my bad.
So even though I had a few rough cuts, I still managed to get 4th place in this event with a total of 106 points, putting me in 6th place overall going into the first round of eliminations. The top 14 contestants move on to round 2. Alright, now this one is a weird one. For this event, there is a pattern of 4 circles drawn on paper with corresponding lines next to them. Contestants are to thrust within the circle without crossing the edge, cleanly extract the blade, then perform a cut as close as possible to the accompanying line without crossing it. And each cut must come from a different direction. Each thrust is worth 10 points, and each cut is worth another 10. Cuts are judged on how close you get to the line, but if you cut through the line at all, you get 0 points for that cut. This event was like my kryptonite. I have very little experience thrusting with longswords, and stopping my cuts midway is something I've never practiced in my life, coming from a kenjutsu background. This challenge is all about control, tip control, and the ability to stop your blade mid-cut, since in European fencing, a lot of times duels were not to the death. They'd either be to first blood or till one yielded, which is completely different from Japanese swordsmanship. With katanas, you slice all the way through your target every single time, so I was pretty nervous about this one. So for my first thrust, I stabbed directly into the edge of the circle, completely botching it, and then do an upwards cut about halfway towards the line. My second thrust makes it in the circle, but I end up cutting way too deep, and I end up cutting straight through the line, netting me 0 points for that one. I do another clean thrust, but afraid to cut the line, I barely cut halfway into the target, scoring me very few points. My last thrust is way too high and outside of the target, followed up by a shallow downwards cut. Man, this was rough. I knew I did bad, but I didn't realize at the time that I actually did the worst out of everybody. I only got 26 points and was in dead last for this event. There's actually a lot of strategy with this one. Cutting far from the line is way better than cutting through it. So it's actually smarter to barely nick the paper if you know you can make up for it when it comes to cutting tatami mats, which is something I really should have done. Not getting the most points is way better than getting 0 just because you're trying to get really close to the line. After this event, RJ, who runs SoCal Swords, noticed I was struggling a bit, so he gave me some really helpful tips. He noticed I was raising my hands up while thrusting, making the tip of the blade dip down. He told me a lot of people do this instinctively, but to instead keep my hands and the blade completely level when I thrust, and to push in and pull out without raising or lowering my hands to have the most tip control. I'm really thankful for this because it was super helpful, especially for the next challenge. So for this feat, contestants are to thrust the sword fully through the mat. Once the judges confirm the blade made it all the way through, the contestant is to cleanly extract the sword and flow immediately into a cut onto the mat. 4 cuts are to be performed, each using a different basic cut, meaning a right and left, Ober and Unterhau. Each thrust is worth 10 points and each cut is worth 20, with contestants being judged on how cleanly they extract the sword and flow into the next cut, as well as how clean the cut is. This one seemed hard. Everyone seemed to be struggling with extracting the sword smoothly. I definitely noticed a lot of people raising and lowering their hands while pulling the sword out, causing it to get stuck, so I was determined to implement RJ's advice. about keeping my hands as level as possible. While watching other people attempt the challenge, I came up with a strategy. First, I was going to thrust really low, as close to the spike as possible. This way there would be minimal movement in the mat and extracting it would be easier since it's near the sturdy base. Second, I would perform the hardest cuts first, since I would have the most room on the mat, meaning more room for error. That way, I leave the easiest cut for last. And finally, I'd focus on accuracy, aiming the cut 5 to 6 inches below my previous cut to ensure I have enough room for all 4 cuts. Now, it was my turn. For my first thrust, I take a deep breath and focus on keeping my hands as level as possible. With my blade and hands level, I push off my back foot and I make it cleanly through the target. I give a quick jerk back to extract the sword cleanly and perform a left Unterhau. I then decide to do another Unterhau since they're more difficult than overhand cuts. I focus on making sure my hands stay level and do my second thrust, pushing with my legs first to limit my arm movement. At this point, I know if I just keep my arms level and quickly jerk the blade straight out of the target, I can do it cleanly and flow straight into my next cut. At this point, I'm feeling really confident, and I'm just focusing on being consistent. The more I do this challenge, the more comfortable I feel, and I pull off a super clean Oberhau. The cut mat just falls straight off, super close to the stand. And saving the easiest for last was definitely the right call. I had no doubt I'd be able to perform the cut so I could focus completely on the thrust and extraction. This felt great, especially after coming in dead last in the last event. I really needed to get points on this, and they informed me I had a perfect run. I got 120 out of 120 points possible, which felt awesome. So after getting the lowest score on the paper thrusting and the very top score on the tatami mat thrusting, I was in 3rd place for round 2. So only the top 4 competitors move on to the finals. And after tallying up the scores from round 1 and round 2, I ended up in 5th place overall, just 6 points away from making it to the finals. This was a really tough pill to swallow, knowing I got so close to the finals, and that if I simply made it through that first paper cut, or did even slightly better on another feat, I could have potentially won the whole tournament, because the finals are all tatami mat cutting, which is what I came here to do. For the finals, the top 4 do 2 more feats. The first one is to perform 6 continuous cuts, alternating between Oberhau and Unterhau along the same plane. So basically a downwards diagonal cut into an upwards diagonal cut at the same angle. This is not an easy challenge. As you can see, the finalists are struggling to keep their edge alignment as they prioritize speed over accuracy and control. The last and final challenge is the double cut. It's an upward diagonal cut at the base of the target, followed up by a secondary cut on the mat before it falls. This one is really fun and something I've been practicing more lately, which makes it even more sad that I didn't get to try it during the tournament. The key is to make sure the first upwards cut is as straight as possible. This way there's minimal movement in the top of the mat. If your cut is clean, the mat should barely move. Then, by using a whipping motion from right to left with your hips, you can quickly follow up with a second cut. A lot of people overthink the first cut and swing way too hard when they should swing only enough to make it through so that there is less movement required for the second swing. And more than any other challenge, this requires the cuts to start from your hips. Like all martial arts, it all starts with the hips.
I didn't make it to finals. The top 4 people went on to finals, and everyone else got eliminated, and I was in 5th place. I was 6 points away, so close. That paper thing really screwed me up, but I got really close. It was still a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and met a lot of really cool people. Had a good time. It feels bad to get so close. Could have won the whole thing. Oh well. Now I know. Definitely want to do some more tournaments. This was really fun. It's my first time doing any cutting tournament ever. And to meet so many cool people who do the same thing or a bunch of sword nerds is awesome.
You did well. I mean, especially considering you've never done it before.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I've done the cutting, the paper. Never cut paper before.
Yeah.
I wish I got to do the double cut. I could have won the whole thing.
So even though I didn't make it into the finals, I still had a ton of fun, and I learned a lot. Even though I'm not really into paper cutting, which clearly shows with my poor performance, I do see the benefits of having it part of the tournament. The accuracy and control required is a good test of skill and adds some nice variety to the feats. I also met a bunch of fellow sword nerds, which was great. It was awesome to connect with other people who are as passionate about swords as I am. I'll definitely be training to compete in future tournaments. This was my first time at SoCal Swords, but I had a blast. Everyone was super nice and welcoming. I was also surprised at the girl to guy ratio. I thought it would be mostly all dudes, but about a third of the competitors were women, which was really cool to see. So if you're into swords and want to get into HEMA or cutting, check out SoCal Swords in Orange County. I'll have links to the website down in the description below. They offer a wide range of classes from longsword to rapier to kenjutsu, so check them out and tell them I sent you. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.